How do I forgive? How do I deal with the areas in my own heart where I need forgiveness? And even more, how do I forgive those who've done wrong to me? There are many videos on YouTube that explore that. And in this short video, I just want to look at one aspect that you may never have thought of before. To get you to the point of this, I have to take you on a short journey through a couple of scriptures. The first one is a story I'm sure you're familiar with, Cain and Abel, in Genesis chapter 4. This is where Cain is so jealous of his brother Abel's favour with God. He lures Abel out into the fields and murders him. God then says to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" and dialogues with him and says, "Hey Abel, you can't cover it up. Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground." Did you know blood can cry out? In the scriptures, it's revealed that the life is in the blood. It's like the life of Abel, the blood of Abel, has fallen out of his body into the ground. His life is now, instead of being in his body, is trapped in the ground, crying out, "Death, I've died," maybe even death to Abel. There's an important point here about death that we don't have time to look at in this video. Just be aware that here, death, it isn't that Abel ceases to exist. His life is now trapped out of his body and somehow trapped in the earth, expressing from the earth. So hold that thought. Abel's life, his blood, is trapped in the earth, crying out. There's a lot of talk about blood in the Hebrew scriptures. The blood is poured out for the forgiveness of sins. One of the main words that's translated forgiveness in the Hebrew scriptures actually means to cover. So to forgive in Hebrew is to cover over. It's something is exposed and now it's covered over. It's forgiven. For someone's violent, selfish acts, whether internal within yourself or external, for them to be covered, there had to be the shedding of blood, and that covers the sins. Then I want to take us to Revelation chapter 4. This is an extraordinary chapter. This is where the whole of the calamity of history, all the rebellion against God, is seen in the heavens. We have a picture of the heavenly courtroom, seeing all of this and the horror of it, and the purposes of God, the good purposes of God to bring fruitfulness, to bring life to people, is in a scroll and cannot be opened by anyone who is on the earth. And there's much sorrow because there is no one who is pure enough to open the scroll. There's no one who's lived, whose life is without blemish, without fault, that can open this scroll, which is what is needed. And John, who's watching this scene, starts to weep because he realizes how disastrous this is. That the purposes of God are frustrated by the wrongdoing of you and me and everyone in history. Then one of those in that scene goes up to John and says, "Don't cry. The Lion of Judah has triumphed." And John turns around and, surprisingly, instead of seeing a lion, he sees a lamb as though it has been killed and yet is alive. A frail, bloodied lamb, but one that is alive. Now, from heaven's perspective, this is the true lamb sacrifice, the one that was intended all along. The Lamb of God, the Christ, who doesn't have his life taken away from him, but willingly lays himself down so that his life is taken away from him. He's not a victim. He's not trapped like Abel, but he chooses to be trapped, to take on the wrongdoing of the world so that the scroll can be opened. Now, these are deep things, but let me try and bring this together. When we're gripped by the horror of the world and what people do, and then even what we do on the inside with our selfishness, in this scene in Revelation 4, you're not left with that. What you're left with is the Lamb of God who takes all of that away. Now that's key. If we look back again to Genesis, to Cain killing Abel, we can see that Cain's sin against Abel, this lamb from the eternal perspective of the heavens, was already there, taking the behavior of Cain onto himself. And more than that, he was in Abel, taking the wrongdoing towards Abel that Abel cannot stop, that Abel is a victim of. The Lamb of God is there, taking the wrongdoing of Cain onto Abel, onto himself. His blood is falling onto the ground with Abel's, mingling with Abel's. And as it says in Hebrews, his blood speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. So first of all we see is the blood of Abel going, horror, death, revenge. And then what we hear and see now is that blood covered, mingled with and covered by the blood of the Lamb, the blood of Christ, that speaks out life, life, life. So here's the enormity of what the Lamb has done. He's not just dealt with your wrongdoing and my wrongdoing within ourselves. He's dealt with every wrongdoing that ever happened towards you and anyone else, as well as within themselves. We're not left with the horror of the dictators of the world and the destruction they've caused, and the abusers of the world and the pain they've left. We're left with the Lamb who takes it all willingly, takes it into his life, mingles with it, dies with it, and because of his righteousness is raised from the dead. And his resurrection power is what we're left with, not the horror of what we've done. Now that's the power of the Lamb of God, where no one ultimately has to be a victim, because he's become the victim for us. As I said, one of the key meanings of forgiveness in Hebraic thinking is the covering. And it's the covering of the life, because the life is in the blood. And that's what can happen in your heart and my heart now. All of the cries in my heart, the horror of what I've done and the horror of what I've done for others, can be opened up. And the life of the Lamb mingles with me in my heart and takes all that as me, for me, dies with it. I no longer need to hold on to it. I can breathe it out and breathe in this new resurrection life that comes with the Lamb of God, who opens the scroll of the destiny of the blessings of God over your life, over the life of those who hurt others, and over the lives of all. Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.